The Simon Boccanegra that we are doing is the 1857 version. So it's Verdi, Simon Boccanegra in its most raw, original form. It's new, it has real excitement.
It's intense. You are on the edge of your seat. I think it's thrilling.
There are so many good tunes also. It's beautiful, beautiful.
It's one of the most beautiful masterpieces of Verdi.
It's something so different, so deep on the meaning of the word.
You need to understand this opera in order to understand something essential about Verdi. It's a dream come true to me to try and get to the heart of this piece. The 1857 version of Simon Boccanegra is one of Verdi's most significant achievements. My hope is that we're going to get people to take this version seriously in a way that nobody has really done before. I think there is a spirit in it, an originality, a daring that is very infectious and very strong. And I just hope we can do it justice.
Hello, everybody. I'm Henry Little, Chief Executive of Opera Rara, and thank you so much for being with us at this exciting launch event of our Simon Boccanegra recording. Today's launch is presented in partnership with Gramophone, who have generously named Opera Rara as their label of the year in their 2024 awards ceremony. And we're delighted to be joined tonight by Gramophone magazine's editor, Martin Cullingford, who's kindly agreed to be our host for the evening. So once again, welcome to Opera Rara. You join us as we're just over halfway through our current season. Our Donizetti song project is nearing completion, with 7 out of our planned 8 recital recordings now successfully captured. And just last week, we gave our 4th Donizetti and Friends recital at Cadogan Hall with Michael Spires, our artist ambassador, and Marie-Nicole Lemieux, accompanied by Giulio Zappa. And you can watch a live stream of that concert, which is available now on our YouTube channel. But now we turn our attention to our latest full studio opera release, the original 1857 version of Verdi's Simon Boccanegra. We made this recording back in April 2024 in Manchester, working with our friends and long-standing partners, the Halle, alongside for the first time the Chorus of Opera North, and the Royal Northern College of Music Opera Chorus. This is the first ever studio recording of this version of Verdi's Simon Boccanegra. And it's the first recording of the new critical edition drawn from Verdi's original manuscript by Opera Rara's repertoire consultant, Roger Parker. So I now want to introduce some very special guests to you. We have Germán Enrique Alcántara, who sings the title role of Simon Boccanegra, and Iván Ayón-Rivas, who sings the role of Gabriele Adorno. We're also joined by Roger Parker, our repertoire consultant and the editor of this edition, and Francesca Vella, who's written a very interesting essay in the booklet to the recording. And finally, we're very, very pleased to be joined by the conductor of the recording, our previous artistic director between 2012 and 2019, Sir Mark Elder. So now I'm going to hand over to Martin Cullingford to take us through to speak to the artists. Martin.
Hello, Henry. Thank you very much for that. And it was a real privilege to give Operara the Label of the Year award last year at our awards. And I can think of no better project really to demonstrate exactly why that accolade was so well deserved than this extraordinary recording of Simon Boccanegra, which I've had the real privilege of being able to listen to and get to know. And I'm going to open by talking to two people who are a very key part of that, already introduced, of course, by Henry, and that is Germán Enrique Alcántara, who sings the role of Simon Boccanegra, and Iván Ayón-Rivas, who sings the role of Gabriele Adorno. Welcome to you both. You're first on the panel today, and we will get into exploring the distinctive differences between this version and the version that many of the people on this meeting will already know. But first, I wanted to congratulate you both on this performance, on your extraordinary contribution to it. Operara really keeps the flame of opera studio recordings burning spectacularly brightly. And I wondered if I could ask you both to talk a little bit about how you came to work with Operara and what the experience was like. Herman, maybe if I can start with you.
Hi, Martin. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. So how I got to start this project with Opera Rara was maybe an accident, but a wonderful accident, I would say. I just got a call a week before the rehearsals start. I didn't know anything about this version. The first, of course, we think, okay, this is Simon Boccanegra. We all have probably some scenes from the second or the last version. So it was an adventure just by opening that first pages of scores and seeing that it wasn't the same one. And it was just a dream, you know. I think I still pinch myself. Even today, we are here presenting this wonderful album, and I think it's very, very special for everyone.
Absolutely. And Ivan, tell me about how you came to be on this recording.
Well, uh, for me, it's a big honor to participate in this great project. You know, make Verdi, it's always a great thing for me. I learn a lot, and especially when you sing with a great conductor like a Maestro Elder, it's I learn a lot. It's not only the um, the recording. It's all the process, all the you can learn in all the time making music with great artists. It was beautiful, and uh, the first time with Opera was wonderful, and always the second, and I'm sure the third and in the future will be wonderful too.
Now, I made reference earlier to the fact this is a studio recording. Obviously, both of you, so much of your work will be preparing for live performances, the rehearsal process that leads up to that, the performances that then follow. But there's something so special and unique about recording in a studio, about really forensically examining a work over several days and being able to make a record of absolutely what you're wanting to achieve. I wondered if I could ask you both to talk a bit about what the studio experience really means to you and how it really differs from the wider work that you're both involved in? Herman.
So, first of all, I think that nowadays is a huge gift, no, to be involved in a full uh, uh, opera recording, because this is not normal. Uh, Maybe 50 years ago, singers had this beautiful contract with Sony or with all bigger companies, Deutsche Grammophon, and record several operas, and we love that recordings. And I think we all have them, like, this is the golden time of, but it's a bit sad for our generation not to really have much space to share what we think maybe, or what we could do with all these uh, things. And I think then Opera Rara is making a huge effort to put all together, and not only bringing the voices of today, the conductors of today, the way of doing music of today, but also these pieces that never been recorded nor heard probably. I don't even know when was the last live performance of this Simon Boccanegra in the UK or out there in Europe or the world. So I think it's a huge privilege, and of course, for me also it's my album debut. So the whole process was a new thing in my life. Um, and not only as Ivan says, the learning process was huge. Was a curve. I mean, was like Mark. It's not because he's here tonight with us, but he's just not a wonderful conductor, but a maestro with all that means. It's for me, a maestro is someone that understands something very deep on the music and is able to share with everyone involved in the process, and make you better in that process, not only as an artist but as a human. And I think this is Verdi also, no, it's a huge compromise with humanity. And in this process, this couple of days of rehearsals and then the recording, even every day of recording was coming into the room with an open heart, and then discover that maybe, as maybe Roger will say after, no, maybe this phrase, we can phrase it in this way because we see on the manuscript, and things. I think it's magic. I can't really describe with words what the feeling is, but and I hope and I believe that we can feel this through the audio, no, through these for these tracks of this album.
I think we can very much hear that. And Ivan, I've seen you perform live, not least at the Gramophone Awards last year. And yet, looking at the video excerpts from the studio sessions, there's an extraordinary sense of drama and presence and energy. And obviously, that's a collective thing that you're all bringing. But tell me about how you maintain and bring something of the live experience into those studio sessions.
Well, actually, make an opera, normal opera in theater is easier than the recording sessions because it's different because you have to control yourself. You have to control yourself because you don't have the public. You have to think about to arrive to the heart of the audience, but of the city, the people who buy or hear the opera in their houses is different. It's different because people when they go to the theater because want to hear the opera, they love and like opera. With the city, you arrive to all the world, and I think the work is harder than the stage in opera, uh, because you have to control these feelings because uh, I don't know, it's so delicate, it's so come si dice, minuzioso, detailed, ecco.
Cool. Right, thank you. Well, Herman, Ivan, thank you very much. And of course, you're
Thank you.
part of a much broader cast. Eri Nakamura, who sings the role of Amelia, Will Thomas as Fiesco, Sergio Vitelli as Paolo, David Shipley as Pietro, and Beth Moxon as Amelia's maid. And we're going to hear both of you and also Eri Nakamura in an excerpt, which is the Act Three finale. So thank you both very much, and here's a burst of what it is that you've all achieved in the studio. Well, that was a real insight into the intensity in the studio that I was referring to, and that actually you can hear so clearly on the disc. So, Mark Elder, a huge congratulations to you on this recording. This project was, I know, a long time, well, in the preparation, but actually just in the desire to do it. So, tell me about how the idea came about to record this 1857 version of Simon Boccanegra.
When people talk about Boccanegra, they think immediately of the one that is constantly played, much more now than it was when I was young, and that is the revision that he did 25 years later than the one that we've recorded. And they do that because it's a very, very fine work. But the one thing it doesn't have is wholeness, a sort of stylistic integrity that is such a hallmark of his greatest achievements. And when I knew and read about the fact that there was the original version, it was impossible to get a score. It was years later before I could actually see what that meant. And I got hold of a score eventually through the BBC, and we did it first of all in a concert performance as part of a very great project, the end of last century, to celebrate Verdi's achievement and to make a Verdi festival in London. And I did it with the Age of Enlightenment in the Queen Elizabeth Hall. Some years later, just before Covent Garden closed for that spectacular rebuild, we did the last production in the old house, which was a staging of this opera. So I had had two chances to get to know it and to see what it is and how it sits in relation to the revision. And of course, the one thing that it has is wholeness. Everything was written in the same few weeks, few months, and the piece has its own language and its own color, its own tinta. And I thought, wouldn't it be marvelous one day to really find the perfect cast and to do a performance of it that could be there forever? There was an old recording that the BBC had done in the studio. I don't know how long they did it. It had some wonderful singers in it. And that's how I first heard the work, before I did my own performances. But I think what I felt, having done it twice, was that there was something in it that was not in the revision, despite the revision's greatness, and that the time surely should come when one could propose this piece as part of the overall journey that he made as a great theatre composer. It was his 20th opera. And there are not many composers alive now who have 20 operas underneath their belt. And each Verdi opera has its own colour, its own overall working, what makes it a very great work or a not so great work. And as a young man, of course, he wrote both. And by the time he got to writing Boccanegra, he had written Rigoletto and Il Trovatore and La Traviata, and he was on the change. He was in the process of changing and experimenting. And I think, really, after all this time, that what's remarkable about this Boccanegra is that it feels like a great departure from the other operas that come before it. And it's as if he was trying to forge something new. He was trying to break a few barriers down and go beyond the bel canto. When he wrote Trovatore, the critics said he was ruining bel canto anyway, that he was actually exhausting the possibilities of the human voice. Traviata made its mark gradually because the first performances were far from ideal. He then went to Paris and did the Sicilian Vespers, which is a beautiful opera, very passionate, but comes actually from a different tradition. And in writing this Boccanegra, he went back to Venice, didn't he, to La Fenice. And he knew that theatre so well. The piece is dark. People didn't like that. One of the things that's so significant about the fact that we've done it now is that we're able to see the work in a much bigger context, not just his latest offering, but his offering from 1857 in relation to where he was going. And I think that's very significant. It's risky. It's very pioneering. It's very original. There are things that people would have expected to be in an opera at La Fenice in 1857 that he just didn't do. He just didn't follow the normal path. I mean, to take one example, the title role of Simon Boccanegra was a very unusually presented work, going from a youthful pirate, a youthful man from the navy, from the seas, and finishing up as a great leader poisoned by an enemy. And he never gave Boccanegra a proper solo chance. He was always in conversation. He was always in duet, in ensemble. And it makes it a very, very interesting work, I think. And I think we're really lucky to have Germán at such short notice to do this part, I must say. I think Opera Rara is extremely lucky to have such an inventive, creative young singer able to bring so much colour to this interesting role. It's not normal. It's not in any sense conventional. Well, I like that. I like that feeling that we're trying to do something that nobody had done before. People complained that there was a lot of monotone in it, that the orchestra had harmony and the voice stayed still on one note. All this now seems peripheral. It doesn't seem so important. What matters is to take the drama of this libretto with all its confusion. It is one of the most complicated libretti to have to talk about. I suppose The Marriage of Figaro is probably still worse. But to tell the story of Boccanegra in a quick 10-minute slot, that's not easy. But the things that matter about the story become apparent as you play it. And the roles, these 5 main roles, are really lovely roles. Great to sing, great to interpret. And what I hoped that we could show was that with the right vocal qualities, the right pacing of the opera, and everybody in the same boat, going in the same direction, we could find for this opera, well, a chance to make its own impact. And of course, everybody's going to say, I know, they'll all say, oh God, but there's no council chamber scheme. What a pity, can't be as good. No, there isn't. But in 1857, he was doing different things. He was making different journeys. He was making different psychological things. He was trying to make a success out of a dark, experimental libretto. And the one scene that nobody will know is the scene that he wrote for the finale to the first act, that he took out. He tore the pages out from the manuscript and wrote this sensational other first act finale. But the one that we have in this performance, I think, is a thrilling first act finale, greater than the finales in Trovatore and Traviata, in my view. Absolutely on the level of the best moments in Rigoletto. And I hope that people will find some surprises in it. I hope they will love the melodies. They're not all the same. I hope they will enjoy the variety and the skill with which he matches it all together.
I'm sure they will. And you refer to the cast and the vocal qualities. It's one of the youngest casts that will have recorded Simon Boccanegra, and for many people, it's a recording debut. And you referred earlier there to it being an earlier radical work, as sort of an earlier part of Verdi's development. Do you think there's something important about having the singers that you've gathered together at this stage of their career to try and bring this version to life?
Well, I would say immediately it's one of the things that Opera Rara stands for. It always has done. The first time I heard performances 40 years ago were full of young singers. Some of them I'd heard of and never heard, some I'd never heard of. And with careful casting and careful preparation, it's a wonderful part of what Opera Rara tries to say in the broadest possible terms. I think all these singers are very, very suitable for their roles. And they bring something special and fresh to it. And that's not the first time that this has happened. I can remember other recordings I've done with Opera Rara, where in the middle of the rehearsals, you sense a slight nervousness in one of the singers, and they say to you, well, Maestro, I mean, it's very exciting, but I've never made a recording before. And this happens quite normally, quite habitually. And I think Opera Rara's dedication to trying to make wonderful artistic statements about pieces that are not well known, it's part of the brief that you should find people not only who could never have done the roles before, but actually have never been in a recording studio before. And that's part of the joy, part of the excitement, getting everybody over their nerves and singing at their best, and getting the choruses, interested in a piece they've never done. And I think it's very, very enjoyable. To give one example, of course, the bass part of Fiesco, which he starts as a senior figure and becomes by the end a very old man for the crisis and climax of the opera. But I believed ages ago, when I first heard Will Thomas, that in time he would be a very great Fiesco, and that what I wanted to achieve with him now was something to show what he's capable of. And, well, everybody has to make their own judgment, but I'm thrilled with what he's done.
Absolutely. And as you rightly say, that is one of the hallmarks of Opera Rara, the giving opportunity, but actually then drawing on this extraordinary vitality of so many young singers, and the alumni list of Opera Rara singers, if we can call them that, which I think we should, is really impressive indeed, and so many members of the cast will join that. You mentioned there Will Thomas, so let's hear him in Fiesco's Aria from the prologue, along with the chorus of Opera North and the Halle, of course. And Spark Elder, thank you very much indeed. Well, now I'm joined by Roger and Francesco to perhaps delve a little bit more into, well, firstly, the differences between those versions, and then into what we actually know about the relationship between Verdi's Simon Boccanegra and the historic Simon Boccanegra. But turning first to you, Roger, we've heard some fascinating things there from Sir Mark about the differences between the two versions, particularly reference to the council chamber scene, but also to the what it tells us about the development of Verdi's musical language and the experiments and radicalism of the time. But you've been most immersed in preparing this score. So tell me what you would see as the key differences between the version from 1881 that we know and the version from 1857, which we're hearing.
Yeah, look, I mean, I tried to explain this in the program book for the recording, but when Verdi, in all cases, when he came to revise an opera, why he did it fundamentally was to update it, to make it more modern, to make it circulate again in a kind of time when to be modern was to be the most was to contribute something important to the repertory. So Mark talked about this. That the second version of Boccanegra is wonderful. It's a wonderful piece, but it's very stylistically uneven because it looks forward. The 1881 version really looks forward in very interesting ways to Verdi's last operas, to Otello and Falstaff. And in all sorts of ways, this earlier version is a very different kind of project. It's quite austere. I think a good example is the very beginning of the opera, where famously in 1881 there's this beautiful string theme which announces the sort of waters around Genoa, and the 1857 version starts in the barest way possible with declamation, with villains muttering to each other, and very little musical substance. It's much more like a spoken drama than anything else. And there are so many examples of that where the 1857 version puts Verdi's development in a different light. And I don't see an issue of quality. I don't see that. I said this in the program book. I don't think later Verdi is necessarily better than earlier Verdi. I think that this Simon Boccanegra is a work, Mark said it already, that makes you understand something critical about an extremely important decade in Verdi's life, when he'd written these three wonderful operas, Rigoletto, Trovatore and Traviata, which were circulating literally all around the world, and he wanted to do something else. He didn't want to just concentrate on that. He wanted to explore something different, and he did that with Verb Sicilian and with Ballo in Maschera, but he also did it with Simon Boccanegra. It's his most daring experiment of that time. So for me, it has fundamentally its own stylistic integrity, and just to say that, I prefer the version that I've known before is really not good enough. I think we have to take it on its own terms.
No, that what it reveals about Verdi and also, as you say, the stylistic coherence is really fascinating to hear. Now, Francesca, you contribute a really fascinating essay into the Operara booklet, in which you to try and disentangle Verdi's figure of Simon Boccanegra from what we know of the historic first Doge of Genoa, and yet also then talk about how that original figure is used by Verdi to perhaps tell us something about the period of time in which he wrote. So tell me a little bit about that, about the two Simon Boccanegras, if we were, and where they're different and actually where they relate.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose I approach writing the essay really as a historian of music and opera. So I was interested in trying to understand more about where Verdi's depiction of Simone, Boccanegra comes from historically, and how closely it might be based on historical reality or not. So we know that Simone Boccanegra was a merchant, businessman in 14th century Genoa, and that was a time of constant tensions between the nobility on the one hand and the rising middle classes from which he came on the other. And he was dogged twice. He was ousted by an aristocratic revolt the first time, and then a few years later he came back to power. And then finally, he was probably poisoned. He died suddenly in 1363. Now Verdi clearly depicts him as a very generous ruler, merciful ruler, a man with strong moral principles up to the very end. A kind of hero or martyr, you could say. And if you start looking at 19th century materials, actually most materials do support this view. They align with this portrayal that Verdi gives us. So they present Boccanegra as a victim of Genoa's endless factionalism, political intrigues and corruption, huge public debt as well. And according to this narrative, Boccanegra supposedly did everything that he could to fix all these problems while he was in power. So that's the main narrative that you find at the time. But then there are also sources that suggest something slightly different. They tell a different story. So they tell us that he was actually a rather greedy man, very authoritarian, to the point that shortly after his death, Genoa introduced new laws that would limit the future Doge's authority, which is quite telling. And there is even a really interesting history of Genoa published in the mid-1850s saying that he died in complete loneliness, abandoned by everybody, and with his soul soaked in bitterness, he says. So clearly there are also darker aspects to his life. And I suppose it's just helpful to keep all these different facets of his personality together, all these different sources together. And also to remember that Verdi's opera and Verdi's character are very much embedded in history. They are the product of their time and of a specific historical tradition from the 19th century. They really mythologize Boccanegra and that period of Genoese history more broadly.
Yeah, and of course, Italy was a very different place in 1857 to what it was in 1881. So the relevance of the character to society must have been very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Now, one of the key places where we can hear a difference between the two versions is in the Act One finale. And so we're going to hear an excerpt from that. You heard a little bit of it in the teaser, but I think we're going to hear more of that now. And Roger and Francesca, thank you very much indeed.
Well, a big thank you to you, Martin, for guiding us through that fascinating journey of our Boccanegra recording. And also, thank you to Gramophone for your unique partnership, which marks our award as our label of the year. It's wonderful to be working with you on this event, which is part of many throughout the year. A big thank you to Germán, to Iván, to Roger and Francesca, and also to Mark for your participation tonight. I'm also really pleased that some other members of the team are also here on this call. I can see Nicholas Ansdell Evans, who was our wonderful repetiteur, and also Martin Fitzpatrick, our assistant conductor. They're also very welcome, and it's wonderful to have you with us. Now is the point for questions from the audience. I could see that there was one question that was coming up in the chat, which I think we've probably answered, but I don't know whether Mark or Roger, you want to add anything, which was around about how different is the 1857 finale to the much better known council chamber scene. I think we've probably answered that, but Mark, do you want to say anything there?
Yes, the scope of the 57 finale to Act 1 is more conventional in that it brings the whole company together, and there's a crisis in the drama that comes from the previous 50 minutes of the first act. It's conventional in that there's a big ensemble, a concertato as it's known, and something else then gets the story to go one bit further so that everybody can express appalling shock and emotional turbulence, and that Verdi, of course, sets that so brilliantly. By the time he wrote the council chamber scene, he was well on the way to Otello, and the whole form of the writing that Boito gave him and the way he responds with his music is much more fluid, much more through composed, and very, very beautiful and powerful. They are two different sides to this Boccanegra plot. Can I just mention something, though, that people might be wondering about? In that extract, when Will Thomas sang his aria from the prologue, the bass aria, everyone will have noticed that the chorus was facing away. Now, this wasn't to express distaste or rebellion. It was to try and get a sense of distance, because the chorus during that aria are actually very distant in the palace, in Fiesco's palace. And what you witness there is how one makes the effect of the distance. What we do is we tell them to turn round and we turn off their mics so that anything that they sing is picked up very late by other people's mics. And it gives a sense of distance and strangeness and mystery about the balance. It's a very simple but very effective technique.
No, I really like actually that particular piece of video, as you say, because actually it kind of shows how we contrive to achieve that sense of distance, in a studio setting. Wonderful. Are there any more questions that anybody would like to ask? I would also say that you can always ask Opera Rara a question. You can do that via our Ask Opera Rara form, which is on our website, www.opera-rara.com, or you can simply use the hashtag Ask Opera Rara on any of our social media channels. So Simon Boccanegra, I'm delighted to say, is released tomorrow. You can order it on the Opera Rara website now. And I would encourage all of you to move over to our YouTube channel for the premiere of the recording, which will be at 8 p.m. following the end of this call. And I think the link to be able to do that is being placed in the chat now. Just to wrap up with some news of further Opera Rara projects and releases coming up. I mentioned earlier about our Donizetti song project. That continues. We will be announcing our 55th anniversary season and the final year of the Donizetti Song Project in April. And if you are in London, there are other opportunities to hear Donizetti's songs performed live by young and emerging artists in our Salon Concert Series, which continues with Ellie Neat and Florent Mourier on the 25th of March, and Joanna Harris and Anna Tilbrook on the 8th of May. And you can find more information on this and everything else about Opera Rara on our website. As I say, opera-rara.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, visit our website, join our mailing list to hear more so that we can stay connected with you. Now, our work is only made possible by the support of our loyal family of donors and viewers. And for more information about supporting Opera Rara, please go again to our website where you can find all of that information. We particularly want to thank our patrons and friends, and a special thanks to our Circle and Guardian supporters who make very large and expensive projects like this possible. We're about to come to the end of our 24-25 annual fund appeal that closes at the end of the financial year on the 31st of March. And if you've never donated to Opera Rara, we would welcome your support, which is so important to this, like Simon Boccanegra, and the many other projects that we do. But for now, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much to Mark, to Martin, to all the artists who have joined the call. It's wonderful to hear your insights into this project. And I would say that this recording of Simon Boccanegra is one of which Opera Rara is immensely proud. So I hope you enjoy listening to it. Thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon. The Simon Boccanegra that we are doing is the 1857 version. So it's Verdi, Simon Boccanegra in its most raw, original form. It's new, it has real excitement.
It's intense. You are on the edge of your seat. I think it's thrilling.
There are so many good tunes also. It's beautiful, beautiful.
It's one of the most beautiful masterpieces of Verdi.
It's something so different, so deep on the meaning of the word.
You need to understand this opera in order to understand something essential about Verdi. It's a dream come true to me to try and get to the heart of this piece. The 1857 version of Simon Boccanegra is one of Verdi's most significant achievements. My hope is that we're going to get people to take this version seriously in a way that nobody has really done before. I think there is a spirit in it, an originality, a daring that is very infectious and very strong. And I just hope we can do it justice.